Hello everyone, welcome to the PSHE question and answer session number 2. Thank you to all those that have taken the time to see the recording on the Healthy Schools website, and for those of you that haven't, hopefully you'll be able to take the time to join us. Today we are covering a different theme. We have the same, pretty much the same panel as we did last week, with a couple of exceptions. So we're just going to start off with a round of introduction. So I'll start with myself. My name is Chris Wood. I'm the Children and People and Families lead at Healthy Cornwall, and I head up the Healthy Schools programme. I'll pass now to Helen.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Helen Courtine. I work for Brook. I'm Head of Innovation and Partnerships there. My background is in teaching and youth and community work, and I was part of the team that developed the training that accompanied the PSHE curriculum. So really delighted to be continuing that through with these question and answer sessions.
And then we also have her colleague Ella.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I'm Ella Craddock. I'm an education and wellbeing specialist at Brook, and I was part of the team who put together the curriculum, and I was also involved in some of the training webinars that you may have already seen. Really excited to be talking to you all today at this Q&A, so thank you so much.
And we also have representation from Headstart today in the way of Ness, so I'll introduce herself.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Ness Little and I am the parent and family lead for Headstart Kernow. And again, absolutely delighted to be part of this week's panel. So thanks for inviting me, Chris.
You're very welcome. And we also have 2 representatives from the Healthy Schools team. First of all, we have Cheryl.
Hi there, nice to be here.
And we also have Shelley Jameson.
Hi there, nice to be here. Thanks very much for having me here today.
Perfect. So we have our panel, and we're going to enter very shortly into our theme discussion this week, which is around creating safe learning environments, teaching styles, and the trauma-informed approach. And obviously, we're delighted that we've got Ness, Helen, and Ella here to provide a sort of local and wider sort of perspective on that. So we'll pass over to them shortly. Before we do, I just thought last week I gave a bit of an insight into the programme and what it has to offer, and what we've been doing with regards to its development in the first few months. And today I just thought I'd share a little bit of sort of around the numbers and the stats that we've achieved to this point, because it's brilliant to obviously celebrate the engagement that we've had in these very early stages. Basically, to this point, we've had 190 members of staff from 85 schools across the county, which is a real achievement, bearing in mind everything that we're sort of encountering at this time, or schools are encountering, I should say, more to the point. That's really fantastic. The sort of breakdown of that, 62 primary schools, 158 staff within them, and also 23 staff within 14 secondary schools. And my maths isn't great, but I know that 62 and 14 does not add 85. So the 9 that are missing are made up of nurseries, APAs, and SENDs as well. So great coverage in its early stages, but obviously we have an ambition for more, but we appreciate there are other reasons behind that. Also, the training, we've got a staff training facility within the programme, and the most popular modules at the moment are exceeding over 150 views, which again is something that we're really pleased with. But just to remind all of those of you that are joining and haven't accessed these resources to date, that they're there and available for you as and when you want them, and the Healthy Schools team are on hand to support you with those as and when you would like. So that's going to be kind of it from me. I'm going to now pass over to Helen to start things off on today's theme session. I'm just going to stop sharing my screen. Aha, there we go.
Brilliant.
I'll pass over to Helen. Thank you.
Thank you. That was nice and smooth. Thank you, Ella, for sharing your screen. So we could go to the next slide, Ella, please. So today's theme, we've had these set of sessions were really set up to give us the space collectively to ask questions as we started to watch the training, consider what it meant for our schools and context, but also as we started to implement the PSHE curriculum in the real life context of our school life. That was its purpose. So we've had a few questions that have come to us about creating a safe learning environment to ensure that when we're teaching PSHE, that it is inclusive for all children and young people. So we've taken that as our theme, and we've unpacked that, and we've talked between ourselves about some of the things that we think might be helpful in answering some of the questions that you have asked in relation to what that means in practice. So what we're going to be doing is looking at why it's important and why creating a safe learning environment is considered a really important aspect of PSHE. And then what falls out of that, so we're going to look at that from a reasons why, and then Ella's going to give us some really practical tips about that and point you to some of the resources that are available for you to use. We're also going to just give us all some space to thinking about our teaching style and whether there needs to be any adapting of our teaching style when we're teaching PSHE. And then Ness is going to give us some really good food for thought in terms of enhancing or extending a trauma-informed approach to PSHE. So so that's what's coming in this session. So I'm just going to do a general introduction before I hand over to Ness. So if we could have the next slide, Ella, please, that would be great. So when we just think about teaching anyway, that whole area of managing your classroom and making sure that we set boundaries, that the school code of conduct and expectations of how children and young people will conduct themselves, it's a key part of all our roles when we're teaching. And it's really vital that we have a well supported classroom and those boundaries in place when we're teaching PSHE to make sure that it's safe to explore the topics and the subjects that we cover in PHSE. So what that might mean is that us as teachers and young people may need to adapt to a different classroom ethos in PSHE lessons. And that's in part because when we're looking at the subjects that we teach in PSHE, it actually touches young children, young people's lived experience, some of which can be really challenging. So as we've talked about what this means in practice, what we would like to present for you to consider in your teaching is to shift the way we think about talking perhaps about managing behaviour and behaviour management to thinking about how we build safe relationships that enable us to teach PSHE so that it's most effective and children can learn the most that they can from the PSHE that we teach. So could we have the next slide, Ella, please? Thank you. Thanks, Ella. That's lovely. So what we know when we teach some of the topics in PSHE, that just the topics and what we're talking about, some of the activities may prompt reactions in young people that are not behaviour issues as such, but we may still find them challenging. So they may laugh, they may joke, they may make inappropriate remarks that we need to do something with, but they are in the context of the complexity of the topics that we're talking about. And young people may find those embarrassing, they may touch on their lived experience, or actually what often goes on because of that closeness to their lived experience is the testing how we respond to those sensitive issues. And we may be getting close to things that they really want to get an adult view and an adult opinion on. So that whole complexity highlights how important our relationship in the classroom is, but also beyond in that whole school context. And so just to lead into Ness and Ness's input, there's the understanding childhood adversity, trauma and the impact of trauma, and applying some of the PACE techniques, some of the techniques that we learn in emotion coaching can really help create a safe environment for all children and young people. So we can end our presentation now, Ella, and hand over to Ness for you to take us through some of the ways that the trauma-informed approaches can really help us to think about creating that safe learning environment as we teach PSHE.
That's great. Thank you, Helen. So from a Headstart perspective, we are very much focused on the emotional health and well-being of children, young people and their families. And as you've alluded to, the situation as it is currently and the new way of being in schools and for children to be experiencing an education setting, and the same for educators, members of staff, we feel that it's a real opportunity for change. So things for you to consider as a school or as an organisation is, what is the culture do you want to adopt in terms of PSHE and delivery of PSHE? So what policies do you have in place to support this? Do you have relationship policies in place that will support some of the values and the principles within PSHE? Is everyone on board? So are the staff aware? Are parents aware? Do they know the messages and the key messages that you're trying to deliver through a PSHE programme? As Helen said as well, what's really important is to consider the use of language. So what we're trying to do here is to build relationships with children and young people, and to very much shift our own thinking beyond the behaviour that we see manifested sometimes, which, as Helen has said, can be very, very challenging. The other thing that is good to think about is that safety is just not about physicality. So you may have a safe, secure classroom environment, but what you need to also consider is that psychological and emotional safety of children and young people when you're delivering a programme like PSHE, because some of the triggers that may occur from some of the themes and some of the topics that you are speaking about. So you have to remember that children and young people may have lived experience of what you're talking about and have experienced some of those adverse events that you may be discussing in classroom. So I think there's a real shift from being safe to feeling safe for children and young people. And once children and young people feel safe, they're more likely to engage in conversations with you, which also means they can come to you and speak to you if something is worrying them or concerning them. One of the other things that you can do, which is great and very, very easy, is to acknowledge and validate feelings. It's part and forms part of PACE, which I will follow up with in a moment. But to acknowledge and validate feelings, even negative ones, enables a child or a young person to be heard. And what they know from that is that they have been listened to. And the other thing, as educators, that we are responsible for is to help children to learn the language, to give them the emotional verbal literacy they need to communicate with us and to tell us what is worrying them and what is upsetting them, so that they can describe feelings around hurt and pain and distress and rejection. So embedding a trauma-informed approach across your whole school or organisation can help you do that. And there's lots of opportunities to embrace. So as Helen has said, moving from behaviour management to relationship building is probably key to this. And all behaviour is a method of communication. So the other thing to remember is that children seek attachments, not attention. And what we try to do within a trauma-informed response is to move away from language such as attention seeking to attention needing. And that is critical and core to building relationships with children. And once we understand as professionals that actually what they're looking for is someone to attach to and somebody to trust and build rapport with, it can also change our own thinking. And what does it mean to be trauma-informed? So those questions are asked quite a lot. So for us, what it means to be trauma-informed is to have an awareness of children and trauma and adverse situations and how they can impact on the emotional well-being of children, young people and their parents, and also staff. So staff sometimes, when they are listening to children and hearing these stories, can experience a level of vicarious trauma. But there are ways that you can seek help and support with this to enable you to be able to discuss some of those stories and receive your own help and support to make sure that you maintain your own good emotional health and well-being and can continue to be an emotionally available adult in school. So one of the ways that Helen's alluded to that you can help and support children is to use PACE, which is to be playful, accepting, curious and empathetic. It doesn't mean that you ignore poor behaviours, but what it means is that you approach it in a slightly different way. So you keep your questioning techniques light, and that you accept the child for, or the young person for, the presenting behaviours as they are, and approach it with a level of curiosity. And that's where wine comes in. So I wonder why you chose to speak in that way. I wonder why you said that. And I imagine this lesson must be really difficult for you. And I noticed that you seem sad or upset or distressed. And this conveys a level of empathy with a child and a young person. And again, once those feelings are validated, it can very quickly reduce the level of anxiety and stress for a child. Apologies, I forgot the word for a moment. And a child will automatically feel psychologically and emotionally safer within their environment. So what we know from this is that positive relationships can heal, and they can either increase or decrease a child or young person's level of vulnerability, again, depending on the topic that you are discussing in the classroom. And remember that words have power. One of the things that I'd just like to draw your attention to, which might be useful for you, is a short reminder on Dr. Dan Siegel's hand model of the brain. Brilliant example. There's a link at the bottom which you can follow, and the video is about 8 minutes long, but it's just a quick reminder on what happens when children flip their lids, and then some of the manifestation behaviours that then present mean in terms of what's happening for them inside their brain. So it's a great resource, it's a great website, and I'd strongly recommend it. It also forms part of the TIS training, which some of you may be familiar with. So moving on to the role of an emotionally available adult, it is really important and really key to ensuring that a child remains emotionally, psychologically safe in a school setting. And there are lots of resources out there and available to help and support this. If you look at TIS UK, we are also designing and developing a toolkit. So it's very soon going to be published. It's Increased Vulnerability and Hidden Harm Toolkit. And you will be able to find this on the Headstart Kernow website when it's available. The other thing to look at on the website, which will be coming up, is that we have a one-day conference on brain-based attachment intervention to transform troubled lives. And again, this is being facilitated by Dr. Dan Hughes and Dr. John Balin. We ran a one-day training at the beginning of the summer. It was hugely successful and people really, really enjoyed the conference. There was lots of positive feedback on the usefulness of it and how people were able to apply some of the very simple strategies into everyday practice to help and support them in the classroom. And one of the things that I'm going to leave you with before I go to resources is something that I learned yesterday about ordinary magic. And this book you can find on Amazon. It's by Anne Maston. And what she describes is the process of building resilience as ordinary magic, because to build resilience, all children need the right environments, the right relationships, and the right chances to be able to safely explore themselves and their world around them. And what does ordinary magic look like? And what is it? It's a smile, it's a validation, it's acknowledgement, it's saying hello to a child, it's asking them if they're okay during a PSHE session, it's checking in with them afterwards. And even though they may say to you that they're okay, it's rechecking the next day or a week later. And that, for most children, is ordinary magic. So if you want some more resources and some further information, please do go to our Headstart Kernow website and have a look at there, because there's a lot of information available to you on not just support for PSHE, but also parents offer the online resilience toolkit, the Bloom process. So there's a number of things that you can access there, and you can also follow a link there to book onto the Dan Hughes conferences and to sign up for the TIS 3-hour awareness sessions. So I will now hand over to Ella and stop sharing my screen so that Ella can continue and give you some strategies to help you on a day-to-day basis. Thanks, Ella.
Yes, thank you so much, Ness. I'm hoping you can now see my PowerPoint. Fingers crossed that's worked okay. Thank you so much. That was really, really interesting. So thank you so much, Ness. So just to take it back a step, we've already explored this and started talking about this, but I just wanted to reaffirm some key points about why having a safe learning environment is so important to PSHE. And we've touched on these already, but just to sort of reinforce that, we need to remember that the subjects and content can and probably will relate directly to young people's lived experience. So we must be aware of doing that safely. We're hoping that young people will learn and explore their values and gain skills around particular issues and topics within these PSHE lessons, hopefully developing healthy ideas and practices. And in order for that to happen effectively, the lesson must be safe for students to express ideas, to raise concerns, and be encouraged to think critically about PSHE topics. Also, as we've been talking about in terms of trauma-informed approach, we must be aware of the potential for emotional responses from our young people to certain topics due to their own personal experiences, perhaps potential trauma or adverse experiences. So we want young people to feel safe within their schools and within their PSHE lessons. And this can be supported, of course, through using a trauma-informed approach. Also, some of the content of these PSHE lessons, it's controversial. It might be challenging or upsetting. So again, we want young people to be able to engage with that content safely and to be able to absorb those key messages and learning. And also we have to remember that young people may not have other trusted adults that they're able to speak to about these key issues that we might cover in a PSHE lesson. So there might be misconceptions, misinformation, perhaps from all sorts of different places like their peers, the internet, even societal stereotypes, which might be where their information comes from. So we want our young people to feel safe, to be able to have that factual information in a safe environment where they can ask questions about subjects they need support with. So it's also really vital that we have this safe learning environment which encourages inclusivity, and that should be reflected with the makeup of the young people in your school, but also obviously as a wider society as a whole. These sessions should be reflected of the needs of the group you're working with. So for example, thinking about SEND or emotional and behavioural needs perhaps, so that our young people can have the best possible chance of absorbing those key messages, developing and learning. So just to remind everyone that a safe learning environment is something that teacher will probably set the tone for during a lesson, but it is a joint endeavour, meaning that all students contribute, as well as other members of staff who might be in the lesson, as well as the whole school environment. So just to sort of reinforce Ness's point from earlier, which is just so important, that we want to extend our ideas about safety within school. So it's not just about that physical safety or maybe our thinking around just safeguarding, though of course that's important. We also want people to have that emotional safety too within all of our sessions. So to think a little bit more practically next, how do you go about creating this safe learning environment? It might seem like quite a large concept to try and get into a lesson. So we've sort of split it into 4 elements that you might want to employ within your school in order to create this safe learning environment. And we've created some resources that are part of the Cornwall and Isles of Scilly curriculum that can really help you do this. There's some webinar training that goes along with this too. But firstly, it's really important to think about what you can do sort of as an ongoing member of staff. So maybe at the start of the year, at the start of each term. So things like making sure you feel really prepared for the curriculum. Have you researched and do you know what topics are coming up, and do you understand how this relates to your school's values on that topic or position statement, so you feel really confident to school's policies around all the subjects that you might be covering, as well as your safeguarding. You feel really confident going into all these PSHE lessons. Also, this might be a useful as well. Are there any topics or subjects that you as a teacher need further support with, and that your own personal values you might need to think about? Triggers for you as a professional that may mean you need a little bit of extra support in order to deliver that topic and create a safe learning environment for your students. You may also at this stage want to anticipate concerns from parents and carers that might come up, to make sure you put some support in place for that. So that could be organising meetings to answer questions, making the plan for PSHE available so everybody knows what topics are coming up when. You might want to put things on your school website, for example. You may also want to think about gaining support from external organisations who can help you to deliver particular topics and really support that delivery and bring their expertise. And you might want to think about the needs more generally of your student body. Are there general trends within the community of your school that you really want to prioritise, that you want to make sure those topics are covered and support with? We want to make sure all of our lessons are, of course, inclusive, and that's in terms of content and resources, but also the needs of your young people as well. And as we've been mentioning throughout this Q&A session, this might be a moment to think before the term starts, before you get into the busyness of day-to-day life at school, to think about how you're going to adjust your teaching style. Is there anything you think you need to change personally, maybe, and how you might discuss this with your students in order to really create that safe learning environment? Then when we get to a specific lesson, you might want to think about any specific needs of the young people and students in your class to ensure it's inclusive, to make sure everything's differentiated so that all your young people can absorb that content as much as possible. You, of course, want to familiarise yourself with the topic, the lesson, the learning outcomes, the key messages, activities, resources, all that good stuff, which obviously we have for you in the Cornwall and Isles of Scilly PSHE curriculum that you can download and use. And obviously thinking about any challenges that might come up for you about that specific topic. You might also at this stage, before the lesson, want to consult the pastoral and student support staff teams about the content of the lesson. Does that mean you need a few more teaching assistants in the room to support you with that lesson, perhaps? Or would it be useful for the pastoral team to know what topics are being covered in that lesson so that they can be ready to answer questions, provide additional support, which might happen for some young people? Then we think it's really useful to think about a safe learning environment in terms of structuring your lesson too. Obviously, please utilise the lesson plans and structures that we've written for you in terms of the curriculum and all the resources. But if you wanted to add fresh lessons or expand on some of the topics that we've put in place, we'd always really recommend a refresh of a group agreement and having time for sort of reminder of ground rules, etc. We'd also recommend always having time to clearly state the topics and learning outcomes within the lesson. This is so that there's no surprises for your students, so that each individual can prepare for the content that's going to come in this lesson. And so think about any potentially triggering or difficult things for them that they might encounter personally, and then think about what they might need to do to keep themselves safe. Maybe that's leaving the session, maybe that's taking a step back, and so on. We then recommend having a warm-up activity, and that really helps you as a teacher to see where the young people are at, see their starting point, see if there's any misconceptions in the room, meet the young people where they are. And then when we get to the main content, this is where you cover most of the key messages and the key content, that you make sure you're using distancing techniques. So that's employing things like case studies, scenarios, and so on, in order to explore a topic in a skills-based way, so that young people can start using their critical thinking skills to explore a topic, but without the need for students to share any personal experiences which may potentially be triggering or traumatic. We'd also recommend including smaller group work as well as large large group activities. This allows young people to express ideas and to sort of explore a topic in a less exposing way. It's also really helpful as a facilitator. You're able to move around, overhear conversations, be asked questions, which is really positive too. And then we'd recommend always having some time to reflect on that learning, maybe with a closing activity, so that the young people can absorb the key messages. It also allows time for questions, options to signpost young people and to do some follow-up if needed. And the importance of signposting, I think sometimes we can overlook that. It's something we're sort of rushing through at the end. But actually, if this is the first time a young person's thought about this topic, they really need to know where to go next for some more information, or if they need to ask questions. And that can obviously be within school, but also maybe outside of school, organisations' websites or phone numbers to ring and so on. And then lastly, during the session, we want to really create an atmosphere of safety. So ideas around respect, being non-judgmental, and allowing people to leave a classroom to keep themselves emotionally safe, perhaps. We should also always be prepared to hold boundaries in our PSHE lessons. So remembering as professionals that we need to keep it safe for all young people in the class. And that may mean challenging derogatory comments, but this should be done in a constructive way rather than always jumping to a sanction. We want to use inclusive examples whenever we can, and without ever singling individuals out. And of course, we want to be aware of the responses to the content which come up for our young people. Are there any misconceptions we need to address? Do we need to adapt our teaching style in order to meet the needs of the young people where they are, the questions they have right then? And of course, we need to be alert to any safeguarding concerns, feeling really confident to follow your school's policy on that and any support needs for our young people. So a really key way to get this sort of really safe environment, this atmosphere of safety for our young people, is always having a group agreement. And we'd recommend this for any PSHE lesson or intervention that you might deliver. And of course, it might mean that you need to adapt language and approach depending on whether you're working with primary or secondary students. In a primary school, you might want to use the idea of the children designing a poster or making a charter to remind them of their group agreement, or actually it might be helpful to have a whole full lesson on this at the start of term or at the start of the year, so you can really unpick what all the different elements of a group agreement means and really explore defining what safety and a safe learning environment is in practice. And that can really set you up for all your PSHE lessons that will come further on in the year, and then when you go back to your next lesson, you can just have a reminder of the group agreement that they've already worked on. So group agreements support children and young people to feel able to learn, to share their feelings and explore their values. It can really help support positive expectations of behaviour towards others, and it helps to set clear boundaries in relation to sexism or homophobic, transphobic, racist or bullying or discrimination of any form. It really helps to give you a framework on which to measure appropriate and inappropriate behaviour, and therefore challenging that effectively by going back to your group agreement. And as we've already mentioned, this should be an opportunity for learning and empathy rather than jumping to a sanction. So group agreements also support that inclusive approach to PSHE. This is where we can talk about, well, this is why we're using gender neutral language. Well, this is why we're trying to be respectful and communicating that really clearly in your lessons. Having that group agreement obviously reduces as well sort of aggressive comments or banter in a negative form that might appear in the classroom. And it really helps to manage discussions where young people hold strong views, supporting the safe exploration of different opinions. So you can explain, in the ground rules, we talked about being non-judgmental and respectful. We're going to make sure we challenge an idea rather than a person, so we can all explore our values and think about this issue really safely. And just lastly, it can really help you as a teacher to make safeguarding policies and procedures really, really clear in practice. We always would recommend thinking about confidentiality within your group agreement. So you might say, look, this is what we're going to discuss in this classroom, and it's going to remain in the room. We're not going to discuss it in our maths lesson that's next, and I'm not going to tell anyone what questions you've asked me, so that we all feel safe to ask those questions. However, obviously, if somebody says something that makes me worried about you, if we're worried you're being harmed or exploited, etc., then of course we're going to take that outside of the room and talk to you about it, and maybe talk to other people about it, because we want to keep you safe. So yeah, group agreements can be so important for this safe learning environment. Okay, so I'm just going to bring back up our theme for today and the things we wanted to touch on, and I hope you feel like we've addressed those things today. I'd really recommend going back onto the training modules and the resources, because there's lots of resources there to help you on the Cornwall and Isles of Scilly PSHE curriculum, as well as some of the really great resources that Ness mentioned earlier. Okay, thank you so much. Would anybody like to chip in and say anything that might have been missed, or anything to add?
I don't have anything to add. I would just like to say how fascinating I find this subject. I think I have complete appreciation for what the thing that the teachers have to consider, and the responsibilities and everything like that, and how overwhelming it must be. And so, you know, to have a support mechanism like this, I hope they will find really valuable, and I really hope that we do get the feedback in time from the schools that are engaging in this, so that they can, you know, if there is development that is required, that we can shape it according to the requirements of our schools in Cornwall. So I hope that whilst we're delivering these sessions in this recorded fashion, in the future, and the Healthy Schools team and myself have been discussing how we take these sessions forward into the new year, and how we would like to see them work in terms of forums and in facilitating those open conversations for schools. It's something we want to hear from schools. So like I said, my message from this would be just to welcome that involvement when the time's right for school staff to let their voices be heard, and to feed back. And I'd also just stress as well that if anyone does have any questions from the issues or some of the themed sessions of the last couple of weeks, please don't hesitate to get in touch with us at Healthy Schools. We might not always know the answers, but we can point in the right direction of the people that do, because I listen to the things that are being covered by Ella, Helen and Ness, and I just think whilst it can all sound so incredibly simple, it can be, when in the classroom, I'm sure, so challenging. So thank you guys. I thought that was if you anything else anyone wanted to add. Perfect. I will just pull up my final my slide for my final points, just on finishing. And they are just a reminder, like the last session, really, just a reminder of where people can find the programme. So it sits on the Healthy Schools website. The link on the slide directs you straight to the page, and I was just going to show you quickly what the resources page looks like, because Ella just alluded to it there. There's a wealth of support and useful links and stuff on there, but appreciate some people may not have got that far, so I will just show that shortly. Just a reminder of the couple of scheduled sessions that we have coming up. So we've got two further sessions in November, at lunchtime on the 4th, 12 till 1, and on Thursday the 19th, first in the morning, 8:45 till 9:45. And as I said before, I'd encourage, if there are any questions that you have from the sessions that have gone before, don't hesitate to ask any questions retrospectively. We're always looking for things to shape our future sessions. So if you have got some questions, please bring them in. Likewise, if they're not related to these 2 sessions, please again send them across, and we can look to answer them either directly or through this platform. And the questions, a link on the slide there. Please send anything through to the Healthy Schools in the inbox. And I just remind you, I think what I'll do, rather than do as I will show you the page, so I can show you where the recording and the frequently asked questions document sits. So here we are. This is the support and resources page, and you can see here we've got our question and answer session scheduled. Monday the 5th is already linked, and you can now see the recording available on the website, which this one will join it either later this evening or early tomorrow morning. Our frequently asked questions document there, which I'd encourage anyone to have a look at before asking any questions, because the most common questions we have tried to answer on there for you. And then we go into the realms of the parent and carers blogs, which you can see there are many, either written or audio links there, and then we move into the curriculum guidance and links and resources and module support. So you can see there we've got Headstart, Kernow, and Brook's websites there for your perusal as and when you see fit. So I think what we'll do, I'll say thank you very much to our panel for their time. It's very much appreciated. Hopefully you can afford us some time, most of you, in a couple of weeks, fingers crossed, and we wish everyone else a really good evening. Thanks very much for your time.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you. Thanks, Chris.
Thanks, everyone.